This is Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story. Exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Bo Tiffany.
Rob, thanks for coming on Digital Voices today. It's
thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. You have such a versatile career, stretching so many different levels. It's hard to get one's mind around a little bit. So with that in mind, let me just start at the roots. Where are you from originally?
I grew up on Long Island, which is literally a stone's throw from New York City.
And big family, small family?
Small immediate family, and then a larger extended family. And I was lucky. Cousins, grandparents were all literally in the same town. So had a great, extended network, family network around me growing up.
Nice. Can you share a little bit about that early life? Who inspired you?
My family's really eclectic, right? Which I think rubbed off. So my dad was a semi-pro football player back in the leather helmet days, but he was also an artist. And if you know anything about the modernist art movement, it was centered in New York, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and on Long Island, out in the Hamptons. A lot of great artists came from there. My dad ran with some of those guys, never made it to that level, but how many people are a professional football player and a professional artist? So, and then my maternal grandfather was a very well respected surgeon. My mom was a nurse. My grandma was a nurse. So we had the science. We were just a messed up family.
Well, I don't know about messed up, but definitely intellectuals. So it must have stimulated good conversations and kind of some thought-provoking stuff early on as a child.
Yeah, and we had particularly from my father's circle of artists and my grandfather's circle of medical people, we always had people coming over, and there were people drawing in the living room and painting in the dining room. You never knew what you were going to get. We
Amazing.
had, in fact, at one of my family's Christmas parties, they always did a big Christmas party for all their friends. People had way too much to drink and sang carols and all that stuff. We literally had somebody, an artist friend of my father's, received acupuncture for migraines, so needles in the head, in the dining room at a Christmas party. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
So where did your pursuit for the fields of law and policy come from?
I stumbled into it. I initially really looked up to my grandfather. I wanted to be a medical doctor, but the medical profession was changing at the time, moving from kind of more of an investigatory, patient-focused world to science and math and calculus. And unfortunately, I never got the math gene. So I hit college and my dreams of medical school vanished really pretty quickly. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I seemed like the law was a good place to go if you didn't have anything else.
Yeah, I also suffer from the lack of the math gene. I recently saw a cartoon, and it was Satan whispering into Jesus's ear, put the alphabet into math.
Yeah.
It hit home for me.
I would have been done. I would have been just out, right? Math alphabet, no way.
Yeah. So where did you start off going for your academics?
So I went to a small liberal arts college in upstate New York called St. Lawrence University. And we joke it's basically the Arctic frontier. It's that far up. And then I ended up going to American University's Washington College of Law for law school.
And was that a huge change considering where you came from? You were always, kind of close to New York City, so that that professional environment, I think probably you touched many times. So was it that big of a shock kind of moving into?
So when I went to St. Lawrence, I went there to play sports, and
Mm.
I hadn't actually visited the school. I'm luckily my son is already knows where he's going to college. My daughter's in that process, but so hopefully he doesn't. Neither of them hear this, but I had no idea where I was going, and I'm not joking when I say the last like 3 hours of the ride to St. Lawrence is through cow fields, and I don't know that I had ever seen that many cows in that much field in my entire life up until that moment. So yeah, it was going to rural upstate New York was a bit of a culture shock.
It's good to kind of explore your state, though. Everybody always thinks of, New York as a state, as a city, but there is quite a bit of rural area, and I love that
Yeah.
about New York. Being from Wisconsin, the dairy state, we also have miles upon miles of farm pasture and fields. For me, it had a calming effect coming from the big city, if you will, to that environment. And while it was great, it took me a minute to get used to. And it sounds like that was kind of the same for you too.
Yeah, I mean, in college it was a little different because it was an enclave, and most of the kids that I went to college with were from New York, or they were from
Oh, okay.
Connecticut or Chicago, and so we had our own little town and gown thing. I'll say this: we have a place in Vermont, and there it is completely calming for me. I cross over the line from New York State into Vermont, and I hit our place, and it's green, and the mountains are around you, and hopefully it's snowing, and the world goes away for me.
Do you find that you need that balance, especially with the lifestyle that you live, that high pressure, high pace? You got to have that time to deflate and unwind, right?
Yeah, it does. It really does help you kind of decompress and not go crazy. And I crave it. Like I'm going up with my kids this week, and I can't wait to get there. Can't wait to get to the farmers market. Can't wait to do all the stuff we do up there. We'll play some cornhole and make some s'mores, and it's like going to summer camp.
Yeah, I love it. It definitely touches upon the, family and small town values, that we cherish so much. So
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
there's
great.
and you being from Wisconsin, this. I think there's a lot to that, actually. I know people make light of it, and people snicker at it, and big city folk don't necessarily always get it. Me being a big city folk myself now, but there really is something about that, small town roots and what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's our TV shows always idolize Mayberry, these small towns where those the homey comforts, and the family values I think that America is based on. We still have that ideology and crave those. So I think that's definitely an important thing.
Yeah, I think that's true.
How did your path eventually lead you to serve in the Clinton White House?
Like most things, I stumbled into it, which is that's actually true for most of my life. I've been really blessed and lucky. I was working in DC. I had just started doing I was practicing law. I was working on this international trade law at the time, NAFTA, GATT, World Trade Organization. And I happened into crossing paths with the original Clinton campaign when he was governor of Arkansas running for president. I had a friend who was on his traveling staff. They called me up. They needed an answer for something one Sunday morning, and luckily I was awake. I don't even remember why I was awake, but I answered it. Ended up working on the first campaign, and then I went back to just being a lawyer. I had an offer to go into the first Clinton administration. I didn't take it. I was making more money. I was a kid. I was making more money than I knew it, could exist. I was doing well. And I was like, wow, why would I do that? And then all my friends, though, all the people I traveled in circles with, they all went into the White House. And yeah, I was doing financially pretty well, but they were flying around the world working for the president, and a very popular president. And I was jealous. I was just blatantly jealous of them. Second campaign came around. I asked him how I get involved. I got involved. At the end of the second campaign, I got an offer to work for the White House, and I took it. I mean, I leapt at it.
Yeah, well, who wouldn't? It's an amazing opportunity within the
Yeah,
White House.
and I will say, I think it's a little less so very recently, but go back prior to the last administration, and we have like we joke, we call it a survivors group, right? There's an informal network of people who work for Father Bush, the elder, President Clinton, President Bush, the younger, President Obama, that whole circle, those administrations, because our bosses were friendly, right? They, President Bush is good friends with Michelle Obama. President Clinton is good friends with both of the Bushes. They go play golf. They hang out together. They do charitable stuff to save the world together. We all are in this loosely styled network, and there's a great deal of common respect, and there's not a lot of partisanship between us. And everybody is just, pretty proud of having had that opportunity. And, it's fantastic to be able to say you work for the American people and mean it.
Yeah, well, and I think that gives great insight. We potentially can change the head of the nation every 4 years. But as you stated, a lot of these people worked underneath the various administrations, which helps to keep that running. And I would think it would be very difficult to replace everyone, every 4 years or 8 years. And then you had to pick up, from scratch, especially with a nation like ours.
I don't think you could actually do it. You have, when you look at government, you have the senior most political ranks, people like myself who were appointed. And then you have people who work for the government, the civil servants. And those civil servants, when you're a political appointee, it's pretty clear that they're going to outlast you. You're going to be looking for work one day, whether 4 years or 8 years. And they're going to still be working for the federal government, and they provide an institutional knowledge. I think, unfortunately, less so recently, but those civil servants for a long time have been a check on the politicals, right? Keeping you in line. It's almost like my dad was a light colonel in the Army, and I do some work for a portion of the military, and we all joke around like that. A sergeant means a lot more to a unit than a lieutenant, right? And I would follow a sergeant well before I followed a lieutenant. It's kind of the same in our ranks. Like, we come as politicals, we go with the administration, they stay.
And since you've seen, these pivotal years, looking at the new releases from the Pentagon and the position of what was just released regarding one of the whistleblowers that came out, one of the top people, David, I forget his last name. Had you heard rumblings of this, through the time that you were there? Or did this catch you all by surprise?
It's caught me by surprise. I'm part of my background. I was a civilian employee, civilian political appointee, appointed under a fairly legendary 4-star Army general, General Barry McCaffrey. And McCaffrey is a war hero. He's a legendary leader. He's difficult to work for. I think he'd admit that. But it's because his standards are so high, and the demands he places on you are so high to get you to perform at a different level than you thought you were capable of. The interesting thing about him and his circle, so because of that, I've had the privilege to work for work for General Wes Clark, a great general, Spider Marks, who I think the world of Spider, and all of these generals, they're a different class of people. I don't mean like socioeconomic class. They're just really crazy smart and super driven and extraordinarily ethical. And they take their ethics and their duties and their responsibilities in a manner that most civilians can't imagine. And I'm going to put words in their mouths. I think I can for all of them. They couldn't imagine the stuff that's happened, right? That transpired over the last, I don't know, whatever you call it, 6 years. Because these men and women, that's not what they're made of. They would never allow that.
It's been difficult for me to watch. I'm 49. I just think anybody in our generation is, been watching the last 6-8 years or whatever in disbelief. A lot of the political discourse that you see and the disrespect, held to the highest person in office. We never saw the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, to put kind of a label on it, if you will. So a lot of the things that I'm seeing on the news, and then we take a look at the previous president, the first time that I think anyone ever thought we'd have a reality TV show guy as, president. But the important part of that too is, I remember the Taj Mahal, I remember the scandals underneath Trump. And I always thought, if someone is crooked, last person we want is our president. And then, he had such a big following that most of my friends were supporters, and I thought we were like-minded. And so that created kind of a cognitive dissonance for me, because I thought, my friends and I saw life the same way. And so I wasn't sure if I was off or if they were off. And I think only time told that truth, as we take a look, especially at the recent news now. Looking at things through your lens of the picture, are we going to regain the poise of our president? I always thought of a president to act in a certain dignified way that understands international relations and how to act accordingly in different countries with different cultures. It's not to stir the pot unnecessarily. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, if we continue to go to this radical side, I could only imagine the difficulties that people that are in there for more than 4 years are going through, and maybe what's even going through their heads. Can you give us some insight to this ever changing and evolving?
Yeah, it's funny because it's not funny. It's actually tragic funny, like a Greek comedy, tragic funny. I had an opportunity when I was working for President Clinton for a couple of hours to staff former President Bush Sr. And I helped him with something that he wanted help with. It was just usual staff work. It was nothing special. It was what any White House staffer should be able to do. But my being able to spend a couple of hours with him just sitting around, because he was waiting for President Clinton, it was incredible. Like, this was a brilliant, wonderful gentleman. Like, just I was lucky to get to spend that time with him. And, I did this minor thing for him. And then later I got a thank you note from him. And that kind of man, right? That kind of person in the office. You're right. We don't have that now. And we went from wanting our president to be aspirational, someone really smart that we look up to wanting a drinking buddy or wanting entertainment, right? Like the politics shifted when we're like, I could have a beer with that guy. That's not the test, right? That's not my test for president. And then it was like, well, it was entertaining. No, I don't want my president to be entertaining. I want my world to be stable. I want my economy to grow. I want people to have jobs. I want opportunity. I don't want there's a Oklahoma smoke show. There's a country song out right now. And I think he uses smoke as a way to be able to say it without being bleeped. I don't want a smoke show, right? I want a stable presidency and administration. And I think part of it is, there are minor things that have changed along the way that make a big difference. There was a time when all the people in Congress, R's and D's, they've all moved to Washington. They kept a house or apartment or something back home, but they lived with their families in Washington. They became members of this community. Their kids played soccer together. They went out to dinner together. Tip O'Neill was great friends with the Reagans. Teddy Kennedy was great friends with people across the aisle. His great friends. And when you're in a community, when your kids play soccer together, it's really hard to be a jerk to each other, right? But now they put cots in their offices and they deliberately say, I'm not part of Washington. I'm from back home, and they don't move here. And I think those things have destroyed the community, and in some ways destroyed the civility that was part of how the gears turned, right? That was the grease on the gears. And I think it's going to be really hard to put, the broken glass back together. Unfortunately, I wish there were an easy answer.
I agree. Let's go down that road a little bit further. What do you see in the next 5-10 years? How is the political landscape changing, and what do you see coming up?
I don't see anything getting. I hope we improve as a country. I hope our presidents improve. I hope our policies improve. I want the economy to grow. I want opportunities for my kids and your kids and everybody else's kids. And I'm optimistic about the country overall. But our politics, you look at the system of rewards, right? What behaviors get rewarded? And in our current media frenzy, social media, splintered, radical, the folks that get rewarded early on, right, in the primaries are the burn the house down folks, right? They get a lot of attention, and they have very dedicated, very diehard followers. The quiet types, the folks that kind of are more cerebral and trying to fix things, they don't attract the attention. And so you can't become president unless you win the primaries. You can't win the primaries unless you win the radicalized base on both the left and the right. So, unless something really significant happens, and there are, is it possible? Like, I think, this upcoming election, see how it spins out, might be something significant where people have to wake up and say, what do I really want? Who do I really want to lead me? I don't like the ways that people are proposing it right now, but I am actually a big believer in the fact that we probably need a third and fourth party. I think you need some centrist, moderately progressive place where my friends on the Republican side and none of us who want to burn anything down, unless maybe our campfire, but those sorts of folks can go and be represented and be the norm, right?
Mm-hmm. I think a big part of that too is the funding that comes along with that, right?
Yeah, it's funding. It's the ability to get on ballots in 50 states. I mean, the two-party system is ingrained, and both parties work to ingrain it to protect themselves, even if it protects the other. Like, they guaranteed they got half the market, roughly, although it shifts. But a third party that actually could become part of the mainstream political discourse and not, some novelty. And the last really good chance we had was Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party. I wish we had a Bull Moose Party right now. I'm sick of elephants and donkeys, quite honestly. I'd like a moose.
I agree. Are you familiar with the open primaries organization?
Yeah, and I'm familiar with that, and I'm familiar with Third Way. Right now, I'm personally afraid of the next election. And I don't really want. I'll publicly say it. I don't really see a good second term Trump presidency. And I worry that a third party system right now would actually perhaps make that more likely. But for that concern, yeah, I'd be the first one to be saying, let's have a third party.
Since we're on this topic, let's talk about term limits and also age limits. Those are two things that have come up quite a lot in the last couple of years, especially. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, I'm a big fan of term limits, right? I actually believe, although I kind of think, and this is because I work for President Clinton, and I think he could get reelected tomorrow and help the country a great bit. I kind of think the term limits ought to be a pause, right? You can have, let's say president, 8 straight, and then you have to take 8 off or 4 off or whatever, and then you can run again. Because I think, why lose that caliber of individual without a really good reason? You gave them time off, you gave somebody else a chance. If the people want them back, let the people reelect them. But particularly in the Congress, where we've seen it on both the R and the D side. Actually, right now, we're seeing it on both the R and the D side, quite frankly, in the Senate. You have Senator McConnell, who I think is having, I'm not his doctor, but it looked like a mini stroke to me, or something went on. Mm-hmm. And then you have Senator Feinstein, who I'm not sure she's all there either. And are they really representing their constituents in the country? I mean, no. I think term limits are healthy. Get some fresh young blood. Shake things up a little bit.
I agree with that, and I really actually like your idea. Without losing the talent, having 8 on, 8 off, or something like that. If the people want to have them come back, I think, like you said, the caliber of individuals that we have running for office is lacking. If we could draw in, someone who has some good experience with bringing kind of normalcy back into the picture to a certain extent, that would be such a helpful thing.
Well, and I think that was the Biden election. Biden was normalcy elected. I mean, it was a reactionary, like, we've had the circus. Now can we just get quiet, right? Let Grandpa take over for a while. He'll be quiet. He's not going to break stuff. I like President Biden personally. I've had a chance to meet him a couple of times. He's, but I do think that we need some young blood, and I do think we need normalcy.
This has been Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany, exploring deep stories from real-life guests with real-life experiences, providing insight to our listeners with every story. Stay up to date on future podcasts by bookmarking Digital Voices with BoTiffany.podbean.com and follow Bo on social media by searching Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Have an idea for a future story? Send your idea to acrmadison@gmail.com. Until next time, grab life by the horns and keep inspiring others.